The medical bay doors hissed open as Kaylin stumbled inside, one hand pressed against her mouth as another coughing fit racked her body. The ship's artificial gravity felt heavier than usual, or maybe that was just the fever making everything harder. She had been trying to hide the illness for 3 days now, but it was getting worse. Behind her, small clicking sounds echoed through the corridor. Vash followed at a cautious distance, his silver fur rippling with uncertainty. The young Therion cub had been assigned to her care 2 weeks ago when his entire family perished in a reactor accident on Station Omega-7. At only 4 solar cycles old, he was barely past infancy by his species standards. Kaylin collapsed into the medical scanner chair, trying to catch her breath between coughs. The scanner hummed to life, running diagnostics across her chest. Vash stood in the doorway, his 3 eyes wide with something that looked like fear. His species had excellent hearing, and every rattling breath she took probably sounded like thunder to him. "It's okay, Vash," she managed to say, her voice hoarse. "Just a little sick. Humans get sick sometimes." The cub didn't move closer. Therians were logical beings, raised from birth to prioritize survival and efficiency. Their civilization had built an empire across 12 systems using cold calculation and strategic thinking. Emotion was considered a weakness, something to be trained out of their young as early as possible. Vash had watched his parents die with dry eyes, never crying, never showing distress. The other Therians who brought him to the human diplomatic vessel had explained this proudly. He was already showing proper emotional control for his age. The medical scanner beeped, displaying results that made Kaylin's heart sink. Vaxian flu, a common illness among human space travelers, but particularly nasty for someone with her medical history. She would need rest, medication, and time to recover. The computer recommended immediate isolation to prevent spread to other crew members. Another coughing fit seized her, this one worse than before. Her whole body shook, and she doubled over, trying to muffle the sound against her sleeve. When she finally looked up, gasping for air, Vash had taken several steps backward. His fur was standing on end, his small body tensed. He was scared. Kaylin recognized that look. She had seen it in dozens of children across dozens of species. The logical Therion training hadn't erased his instincts completely. He was a child who had already lost everything, and now the only familiar person in his life was clearly unwell. "Hey," she said softly, extending one shaking hand. "I'm not going anywhere." Vash's ears flattened against his head. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he turned and bolted from the room. Kaylin's heart broke a little. She understood. He was protecting himself, maintaining emotional distance just as he had been taught. It was the logical thing to do, the Therion thing to do. She initiated the medication protocol and settled back in the chair, closing her eyes. The fever made her thoughts fuzzy, and exhaustion pulled at her consciousness. She must have dozed off because when she opened her eyes again, the ship's chronometer showed 30 minutes had passed, and Vash was standing in the doorway again. The cub held something in his small paws, a thermal blanket from the supply closet. He had dragged it all the way from the cargo bay, judging by the way it trailed behind him. His 3 eyes were fixed on her face, watching every breath she took. Kaylin started to speak, but another cough interrupted her. This one was harsh and painful, bringing tears to her eyes. She pressed both hands against her chest, trying to ease the aching. Vash flinched at the sound. His ears went flat again, and his fur rippled with clear distress. For several seconds, he stood frozen in the doorway, obviously torn between fleeing and something else. Then slowly, very slowly, he moved forward. Each step was deliberate and cautious. He dropped the blanket halfway and kept coming, his small body trembling slightly. When he reached the chair, he stopped and looked up at her. His 3 eyes were too wide, showing white around the edges, a Therion fear response that their training tried to suppress. Kaylin held perfectly still, not wanting to spook him. She had learned in her xenopsychology training that young Therians rarely initiated physical contact. It went against their entire cultural framework. Another cough built in her chest, and she couldn't stop it. She turned her head, trying to muffle it, but the harsh sound filled the medical bay anyway. Her whole body shook with the force of it. That's when Vash moved. The cub hesitated for just a heartbeat when she coughed. Then, with visible determination, he pressed his small, furry head against her chest, right over her heart. His body was warm and solid, and she could feel him trembling. Kalen froze, afraid to breathe. Vash's position was protective, instinctive. He wasn't seeking comfort. He was offering it. His small body was positioned as if he could shield her heart from whatever was hurting her inside. Tears welled in Kalen's eyes, and this time they had nothing to do with the coughing. She slowly, carefully, brought one hand up to rest on Vash's back. His fur was incredibly soft under her palm. "Thank you," she whispered. Vash didn't move away. He stayed there, pressed against her chest, his rapid breathing gradually slowing to match her own. Through the fever and exhaustion, Kalen felt something shift between them. This wasn't about logic or training or what their ion culture expected. This was about a scared child who had already lost too much, choosing not to lose anyone else. This was about a species that prided itself on emotional control, discovering that sometimes emotion was the strongest response of all. The medical computer beeped, reminding her to take her medication. Kalen reached for it with one hand while keeping the other on Vash's back. The cub didn't move, even when she had to shift to swallow the pills. They stayed like that for a long time. A sick human and a frightened Therion cub, proving that compassion needed no translation. When other crew members checked on them later, they found Kalen asleep in the medical chair with Vash still pressed protectively against her chest, both of them breathing in sync. The galaxy had taught the Therions that emotion was weakness. But in that moment, one small cub learned what humans had always known, that caring for someone, even when you're scared, was the bravest thing anyone could do.